Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to work on a Bass Pro Shop reel. This one is the Offshore Angler, and it's the Frigate. So I guess if you have reels that are built like a tank, you can have reels that are built like a frigate, a war machine on the waters. And we'll see. This one's a little punky. And fortunately, David, who sent the reel in, also included a schematic diagram, and for those of you that are unfamiliar with them, those are burst diagrams that show you all the pieces and parts. And interestingly enough, it says the Sea Lion spinning reel in the box for the frigate. So if you have a Offshore Angler Sea Lion, well, I guess it's the same name and everything other than maybe cosmetics or maybe it's just an updated version of same. We're going to start by taking off the exterior pieces. That includes a couple of things. This says 8 ball bearings. Well, I see one of the ball bearings sitting right up top here on the spool. And we're going to count them. Here's another ball bearing here. That makes 2. And we'll see where the other ones go as we go through the process of taking this apart and servicing it. I don't see this cap moving on this side. We'll see if we can turn that loose. We can. So this is a handle that screws off. As I take my pieces and parts off, I'm going to put my big pieces and parts right on my table. I'm going to use a parts tray for everything else so that I know where I can find those pieces when it's time to reinstall. I also recommend that you wear a protective glove. We're never quite sure what greases in that are inside the reel. And if you keep them off your hands, well, you're better off for it. Right now I'm seeing 3 screws that hold the case on. They're Phillips head screws. I'm going to take them off. And the bearings look substantial. I don't know what the price of this reel is, but it does look like it's a substantial reel. It's not a pen reel. A lot of people see a black and gold reel and assume it's a pen reel. It's not a pen reel. Unfortunately, this parts diagram doesn't tell us much about it in terms of who the manufacturer was, and that it only tells you that you can send it for repair to Outdoor World Rod and Reel Repair in Springfield, Missouri. So I assume that they have a stock of parts there. And most of the times these reels come with a 1-year warranty against defects in workmanship and parts. Of course, if you've hurt the reel some other way, dunked it in the ocean or dropped it in the sand or the like, those typically are not covered. We have the 3 screws. They're all the same size. I'm going to take those, I'm going to put them into my parts tray. And a good time to recommend that if you have a reel that you're working on and you want to make sure that you're going to be able to put it back together, that a good thing to do would be to take pictures along the way. Now I'm taking pictures with a video, but if you don't have the video capabilities, then go ahead and use a fixed camera. Well, I was just looking at, it appears that the Sea Lion schematic is not quite accurate in that it shows the reel coming from the off position, and in this case I'm not seeing how this is attached. I'm not sure if it's screwed up or not, but we're going to take this off so that we can pull the rotor up, because I'm sure that it appears that that case goes all the way up, because I'm looking at the seam here, which means that the case is buried under the rotor. Normally there's a little clip or something that would hold this top portion on. I'm just not seeing it right now. So we'll show you how to work around that if you find yourself in a similar position. I'm going to take these as we lined them up. I'm going to place them into my parts tray. And on that bearing, I'm going to oil that bearing, because I did hear a little bit of bearing noise as we were working through this. I'm going to take the retainer clip off the rotor nut. That is also a Phillips head screw. And I'm not crazy about doing it this way, but it is an alternative for you. I'm going to take the retaining clip off, and I keep those in a separate section of my bench. then let's figure out what. All right, this is a 12 millimeter nut, and it comes off in a normal counterclockwise direction. So this says on here that it's a 4.9 to 1, which is a fine ratio for an ocean reel. And we're not going to be able to get that nut off the shaft. Don't worry about it. We're going to pull up on our rotor, and that will give us access underneath here to the screw here, and sometimes there's a screw on the other side. I'm not seeing that one. So if we remove this screw, we should be able to get to the base. As I mentioned, most of the time this collar will unscrew, but I'm not going to take the risk of trying to figure that out. I don't see it coming off the axle shaft in the parts burst diagram. So I'm just going to leave well enough alone. This is perfectly okay to do it the way we're doing it here in terms of lifting the rotor without totally removing the rotor. And then when we get underneath, we'll be able to remove the crosswind block tie-in to that axle shaft, and then we'll have access to the rest of the case. I just took that last screw out. That's also going into my case screws. So now I know I have 3 case screws that are the same and one that's smaller. Now we should be able to remove this, which we can. You'll see a burring on the back here. So this reel's got a lot of burrings in it. Now I'm going to rotate that axle shaft. By putting the rotor back on, turning it so that we can come down and grab an access point for the screw that holds that axle in. So if you like reel repair videos like this, if you like to learn more about fishing reels, if you're just curious about how they're made and how they come together and what's underneath the covers, well then I would recommend that you subscribe to my channel. That's easy enough. Just hit that subscribe and then hit that button, the notification button, and that'll let you know when I'm posting new videos. Alright, with that screw out, you simply pull the axle shaft up. That can go into the parts tray. We can remove the main gear, and we can see that the reel is dry, and that's probably what's causing this to kind of speak up a little bit. I'm going to leave that right on my bench because that's the next piece in. We're going to take the crosswind block out now, and this differs from that C-line picture as well, because on the C-line picture there was a ball bearing on this crosswind block, and that's not on this one. I'm going to grab a paper towel. I'm going to wipe that old grease off of this, put that into the tray. I'm going to go back to my axle shaft now. I have that nut on that I just took off, and I'm just going to see if I can't put that screw right back in here. If I can do that, then I don't have to go looking for it later. Well, me and small screws have a little bit of trouble. We'll leave that to the side. We're going to wipe that axle shaft off. I'm going to put that right next to that little screw in the box. Alright, you can see that the rotor comes off once you remove the axle shaft. And next up then is removing the crosswind gear. Now that's a big crosswind gear. That's why you have a lower ratio. You have a pretty big main gear. You have a relatively large pinion gear. That's going to give you your gear ratio of 4 to 4.9 to 1. If that was smaller, if this was bigger, you would go that way. And this one, well, it says it's got quite a throw in terms of up and down movement on that spool. We're going to take the gear while I have it in my hand. I'm going to use a cotton swab to take off the old grease. And I don't know when this reel was made, but that grease does not appear to be too old. But it does appear to be thrown off of all of the teeth, so it's less effective. Once I scoop out the grease from the inside, I'm going to use a hard brush. This is just a dollar store brush. You can use a toothbrush if you like. You can use a metal one if you have a brass brush or something. I tend to try and do as least abrasive as I can when I do these. There's no sense scarring something up if you don't have to. And if you can just simply get it clean like that, all the better. So much of reel service is cleaning, checking for damage or wear, and then doing the relubrication of the reel. I'm going to take off the oscillation gear now. Simply pull it up. I use a needle nose pliers to grab the stud. Make sure that this is all clean. Check the teeth. I was doing that on the main gear. I probably neglected to say, but check all the ridges on the teeth. Make sure that they're nice and straight and firm and uniform. Check it from the profile as well. And on the back, make sure that it's clean. And then you can kind of put that away. We'll go over here and we're going to take the time to clean up that grease that's on the inside of this. There's another burring on the back here. At least it appears to be a burring, not a bushing. And it does say 8 burrings, and I've kind of lost count. But we'll take it that there's 8 burrings in here. And just a little bit more of the cleanup there. Now, if you had something that was particularly aggressive in here, maybe you had sand or dirt or something, then a good washout with fresh water would also help once you get all the movable pieces and parts off. Well, that appears to be a bushing, not a burring there. And if you like, you can take a penetrating oil and just kind of use that to break up any more of the greases before you continue. All right, that case is pretty clean there. Just make sure we're clean on this side. And the only piece that needs to be removed now is the pinion gear setup up top. And again, we're checking those because, well, when you have a top drag reel, that gear gets an awful lot of stuff through there. To get to that pinion gear, the first thing you're going to do is remove this collar, and before you do that, you're going to take a note, maybe take a picture. You have a lip on this collar and it's facing up. You also have a stud where this collar locks in. So you want to make sure that when you go to reinstall that you have this collar right and the orientation right of it. So ridge faces up and the hole in the collar goes over a stud. I'll lay those right on my table here. I generally do not like to lay things on my table because one quick drop of a tool or maybe a brush with the pieces and parts, well, it knocks it all away. I'm going to put those right on my table because I'm going to just take this clean up and we're going to put it right back in. All right, we should be able to remove the pinion gear assembly now. And here's another difference on the reel that was shown in the schematic and the reel that we have here. The schematic shows that there's a ball bearing below and above. This one only shows the bearing above. So be careful. If you do get a schematic, validate that it's for the reel that you have. And if it's not, well, then what I was saying before about taking the pictures and the like, it will prove to be a lifesaver if you get stuck. I'm going to take the collar. This is just a bearing. See, that schematic said that you had a collar going here. No, we don't. That's a shielded bearing. We're going to oil that, let the oil seep into that. Now we have the anti-reverse clutch and the collar. Notice that there's 2 sides on this anti-reverse. There's a plastic side which was facing down and a metal side that was facing up. Very important when you go to reinstall that, that's the way you put it back together. We have the collar, and then we have a metal washer. And again, I'm going to leave those right on my table because they're going right back on the reel as soon as we do a little bit of cleanup. And we do have a bearing on the bottom of the stack. So get a little bit of oil on that. I'm going to put my paper towel out, and we're going to do the same thing for this one. I feel a little bit of grit here. I don't know. Maybe this had some water intrusion in it. That grit feels a little bit like sand. And we're just going to pull it all out. Make sure, just like we did before, that all these channels are clean, that they're uniform, that they're not scarred or bent in any way. Because if they are, it will not perform optimally. All right, it's time to just grease this up and put this right back together again. I'm going to use fishing reel grease. I use Penn precision reel grease. It doesn't matter to me which fishing reel grease you use, but it does matter to me that you use a fishing reel grease when you are oiling and taking care of your reel. All right, next up then is the little washer. All you want to do on an anti-reverse clutch is make sure that it is clean and that there's no dirt inside of it. You do not oil that anti-reverse clutch. This is a friction-driven device, and oil reduces the friction, and if it reduces the friction, you may have an anti-reverse skip. Some folks ask me why their anti-reverse clutch is failing. That's the number one reason. They've been pouring grease in here and oils in here, and it just can't grab that collar. If it can't grab the collar, then it's not going to work properly. It's working properly here. When you're spinning the reel, it's going to be turning fine, and then it's going to grab it when it goes back. There's your main bearing. And for the next fellow that gets to do this, fella or gal, whoever's servicing the reel, and put a little bit of grease on the outside of that bearing before I put it into the case. That way it won't stick, or if it does stick, it won't stick severely. All right, that's what's going to take care of this. Now we're going to go look for that collar again. Remember what we said about the collar. You have 2 studs, so feel for them if you have to. And then just load it up where the alignment works. And I'm not feeling the studs there, so all that tells me is that this was probably designed for a different reel. That or it broke off. Not sure. I mean, the case looks the same, but I'm not feeling the studs. Okay, 3 of these screws go in. Doesn't matter which ones you put in because we checked when we took them out and they're all the same size and threading and the like. And while I'm doing this, if you have any questions on a fishing reel, maybe you're working on one and you get a little stuck, maybe you've taken one apart and put it back together again and it's not doing what you thought it was going to do, or it's doing something other than what you thought it was going to do. If you want to leave those questions in the comment section of this video, I'll be happy to try and answer those for you. I don't know all the answers, but I've had a lot of experience with this now, and well, if it's something that I can kind of point to, I'll certainly let you know. Check on the inside, make sure all of this is clean. Sometimes you find sand and other things in there that are just kind of adhering to it. Get rid of it. We're going to put a drop here. It doesn't really matter too much. You don't necessarily have to oil that. There's a spring here that's on a post that drives this. It's going to move that down. When it comes down, it's going to hit this trip ramp right here. As you're casting, you'll see it goes up, and that's what's going to push this up, push your bail back. While we're on that bail, I generally like to just either spray or put a drop of oil in each one of the seams. Again, there's no moving parts in there to speak of. There is a spring on this side that will make it move. And so I just want to make sure, basically, that I'm cleaning out the dirt. We're going to take our rotor now and we'll reinstall that. Well, we're going to leave that on, but we're not going to put a nut on that yet because we've got that shaft we got to work on. All right, back to our oscillation gear then. Not sure if I oiled that bearing in the back, so let's make sure we do that. Put a drop of oil on that bushing. That's fine. The oscillation gear gets grease on all sides. Gets grease on the rim here because, well, it's going to come in contact with that bushing in the back of the case. Gets it on the teeth because that's going to interface with the drive gear that's on the back of the main gear. And it gets it on the face because your crosswind gear is going to slide up and down on that crosswind block. This is the gear. The block is going to do the sliding. We'll come over to that block then. It's been cleaned. We're just going to make sure we get grease into the cavity here. That's what's going to ride on the slide there. And then if you like, a little bit of grease onto the side case here. Both sides where the outsides of this block is going to ride. You'll notice that I put the stud all the way in the down position because that's going to help me when I go to reattach the main gear. All right, the main gear has been cleaned. We want to do the same thing here. We want to grab some grease. And don't get it in every slot. You don't have to. And if you put too much grease on here, well, it's going to be exactly what happened when we opened this up. All the grease is going to be puddled to the inside here. This looks like a different kind of metal. I'm not sure what it is. It's a kind of a gray, dark gray, or I want to say battleship gray, in keeping with the frigate name, I guess. But I'm not quite sure what that is. But I'll trust that it's been engineered to work well with fishing reels. And now we can install that main gear. All right, we're going to put the axle shaft on next. We're going to make sure that it's been cleaned. I wiped it off. I don't find any pitting or anything going on like that. A light coat. Then we got two things that are kind of going on here because, well, I haven't figured out how to get this top off of that axle shaft. So we've got to put the nut on the shaft, but not on the rotor. So I'm going to set the rotor. I'm going to put the nut here, just center it, that's all. I'm also going to put the little clip on for now. And now I can put the rotor in, and like magic I can pull that off to give me access to that case screw. Next step then is inserting that axle shaft. To the low position and going into my box for that little screw. That is a Phillips head screw. While I'm working on this reel for David, if you have a reel that needs service but you're not up for servicing it yourself, I do service fishing reels by mail. And if you are interested, if you send a note to my email on the business card that follows, I'll be happy to provide you with that reel repair information. All right, well, next thing I want to do is I want to turn the rotor to get it out of the way. It's got to go up. So we want to pull that axle shaft up. That's going to give me the ability to move this out of the way so that I can go ahead and put that side plate back on. And we're going to make sure that that bearing's got oil. I think I oiled it before, but it doesn't hurt to put a little bit more oil in there. Now we'll go set that case. It's set very nice and easily. And remember, we've got 3 screws that are wider in diameter. Those are going to be the case screws below. We got one small one, so let's get that out of the way right now. That's the one that's going to go underneath here. We'll put that one on. I'm sure there's an answer to that axle shaft there. I always wonder, when you have to do something this way, there's got to be a different thing. Like, for example, Quantum has an axle shaft like that, but it has a little C-clip up top, and when you remove the C-clip, you can pull that assembly off. In this case, I didn't find it, and I'm showing you the workaround because of that. But I always wonder when you're doing these things, making them work, and I'm sure they're hand assembled for the most part, I would guess that there is an easy way to do that. And it's probably that that's screwed on, but again, I didn't want to risk any kind of breaking the axle for trying to figure it out when there's an acceptable alternative. Next up then, we will center this now. And now we can turn that nut. And actually what we can do here, I believe, is we can take this off again. That can go over the top. Now we're going to take our nut and hand thread that as much as you can. And then we know this is the 12 millimeter. So go ahead and tighten that up. It came off in a traditional counterclockwise manner, so it goes back on in a traditional clockwise manner. And then we can take that little tie down bracket And it's always fun trying to match that to a hole, and of course I'm right in the middle, which means we've either got to tighten it or loosen it a bit. I'm going to try to err on the side of tightening it first. All right, and it looks like we've pretty much got that now. Back it off slightly. Aligned with the hole, I want to get that little tie down screw that goes next. And a little bit of grease will hold that screw in place there, usually. Once that screw is tightened down, then we can work on the bearing assembly before we work on the spool. We had a black washer that kind of has a cushion to the bottom of it. That seems to be the bottom end bearing shield. And we had the bearing. And we had the metal washer, top bearing shield. And then we had the spool adjuster, height adjuster. That's tight to the spool. It's always a little bit difficult, but that's how you found your stack there. Let's come over to the spool then. We have a big clip, looks like about an 8-sided clip there. We're going to remove that to get to the spool stack. And we'll take a look at the washers. Now this reel is in pretty good condition. Boy, it's got a lot of max drag in this reel. I'm looking in here, we have what appears to be quite a few washers in there. First group off then should be this bearing. Once you remove that clip, you can remove the collar, then the bearing, and then there's an awful lot of washers underneath here. And I'm just noticing as I do this how they set. So we have Carbon-Tex washers, very good, nice. We have round. Now we have an eared washer. There's a lot of max drag in this reel. There's a lot of surface area. And as I take them out, I'm just spreading them along. Wow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 washers. And underneath that, if you're working on this, there's a click ratchet that goes in the bottom of this spool that's telling you when you're spooling to the outbound with the drag. So see the piece back there in case you need to do that. Well, these are all fine. This was more for a demonstration purpose than anything. And we have 6 metals. And we have 5 fabric, which means the metal eared washer, last out is the first in. This is a deep cavity, but make sure that that's the first one in. And then typically it is alternating the eared washers with the keyed washers. This is a keyed washer. It's round, but it has a rectangular internal. Then you have your eared washer, second eared washer there. Those go in the channels. I use a pick for an awful lot of things. It's just a way of centering them and helping you get it. You can see the Carbon-Tex with the hatch on it. Another of the rectangulars. Probably would do well to do this on the reel itself, because I imagine that somewhere along the line this might get interesting in terms of the alignment of all of that. Once you do that, you can see there's a weather seal on this. And then it's a pressure down to put all this back together again. Let's press it down. You have the lip here. You have this retention ring, and that's your drag surface on the reel. In this case, Carbon-Tex washers do not need grease. If you do put grease on them, make sure to wipe it off. it doesn't help them at all. They're non-absorbent. And if you don't, feel like a safe cracker here. If you leave the grease on there, they're actually going to slip because they can't absorb the grease. So it's just going to get in the way of the friction needed for a drag washer. Let's go ahead. We'll tighten that up. Make sure that it's working. It's nice and tight. We're going to back the drag washer off so that you don't compress those washers while they're not in use. Handle goes on next. And that's the service. This is the Offshore Angler. It's the Frigate model. Still got a little noise in there, but I think that's probably going to be indicative of the reel, probably due to use. Everything on this has been cleaned, and this one's ready to go fishing again. So I hope you've enjoyed it. It's the Frigate, and I don't see a size on this one. I should see it somewhere, but I don't. I'm going to guess the 7,000 and 4.9 gear ratio, 8 ball bearings. Nicely made, and made in China, and for Bass Pro Shop. And I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, please like it. If you want to see more, well, please subscribe, and again, hit that notification button. To everyone who's a first responder and essential personnel, thank you for everything you're doing during the pandemic. And to all, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.